So next we're going to be bringing on Michaela. She is
Yay.
our little our psychology, I guess I'd call her expert for the show. And let's see if we can get her on. I know she's already there. She is, and we have Maslow today. Hi, Maz.
We wanted to make an appearance, of course. So
yes, of course. And he's got his ball. I see he's brought us his ball.
He wanted everyone to see his very special Baylor ball. That's not ours. It flew over the fence, and our neighbors never came to get it, so it's now Maslow's.
I love it. I love it. So, and first of all, we love having Maslow on the show because he is actually a professional too. He has a job, and he goes around and he makes people feel better at the local hospital, and he's quite the celebrity. In fact, I was just notified by one of our other guests, Kathy Osborne, that she name dropped Maslow to get an appointment for her boss.
Really?
Yes, she name dropped the dog.
I'm telling you, he is the big the executives at my mom's hospital where we go. They always talk about Maslow. They'll bring him up in meetings. I'm known around Waco as the girl who has Maslow, not as Michaela. Like if I'm at the park hiking or something, I'll be stopped like, "Oh, you're the one who has Maslow," and I'm like, "That's me." Yeah.
So I don't know if you heard our last chat. We've got to not talk about Maslow anymore as much as we all love him, but I don't know if you heard the last bit with Anna. So we had the question of, somebody was promoted and did not receive a raise yet due to COVID, which is, that's certainly normal, but I will also say employers pull a stunt sometimes, and they will take advantage and say, well, this is going on, so we'll give you a raise later when it's convenient for us. But we want you to still go ahead and do this work, right? So this is something that happens sometimes. And now, when we've talked about that, you need to wait till things start to plateau, right? And things seem a little bit more even keeled, but you also don't want to wait forever. So when it's been a couple of months and you go to approach this other person and this manager or HR, whoever it is, probably your manager, and say, hey, I'd like to have a raise. Do you think, Michaela, from a psychological standpoint, that it would go over better to do kind of a let's discuss this and let's plan it approach, or to come in and say, by this date, I need this number? How would you, from a psychological standpoint, how would you approach that?
Well, first, what I want to say is it really depends on how comfortable you are in your job and just being really honest, how willing you are that you may potentially lose your job if you approach it from that second standpoint.
Right.
You need it by this time. So if you're confident that you have another option and another opportunity where you can, in your life, you feel comfortable that you can transition out of that work that you're in, and you feel that seriously about it, that powerfully about it, then I would say, yeah, that would be the way to go. I always prefer to take the more timid approach, because then you could still make that decision later. You can still make the decision that this isn't the place for me and leave on good terms with the approach of let's work together. This is what I'm seeing. This is my need. And I really want to say assertiveness here. Just go and I love that Anna was talking about, you all were talking about that. I got on about 10 minutes early so I can catch the last 10 minutes or so. And assertiveness, confidence, go in there and state your needs, state what you need, respect your needs. And I think that is so important is being able, and that's the psychology part that I want to bring into it, is respecting our human needs and really advocating for ourselves.
Right. And I think that's a good passive approach. I wouldn't use the word timid. I would say that's a good passive approach.
That's
what do you think? What do you think, Justin? What's your take on that one?
I agree completely. This idea of assertiveness is interesting to me, because I think from the last conversation with Anna, we talked about the pay discrepancy of 20 cents, right? 20 to 25 cents. Being assertive in these things, I think is hugely beneficial for everybody. Yeah. Be honest, be authentic about what you want, what you need. And I think that just moves the conversation down the road a little bit easier for everybody.
Right.
Instead of the old, I don't know, back in the older days, we won't go back too far, but it was a very cat and mouse type game on how you approached these subjects. I think we need to stop that in companies. And I think as a manager, I'd be absolutely appreciative if somebody came up to me and said, this is what I want, and this is what I need, and this is why. Yes. Fantastic. Make a case. And then, because that's how I look at every decision, right? I look at it from a point of view of, does this move the company forward?
Right. Absolutely. And real quick, sorry. I was going to say real quick on this, and then I kind of want to jump into the subject that you're actually here to talk about. I think, guys, first of all, I think that these are really great suggestions, and you should be collaborative, especially right now with COVID. Everybody's kind of a little bit more on edge. So go in with that kind of softer approach that we discussed. If you want specific tips, reach out to Michaela or I. We would be very glad to connect with you on LinkedIn and discuss these things. And we'll drop, in fact, we have already dropped her LinkedIn, so feel free to reach out to Michaela as well. So go in there with that softer approach, but also don't leave with them being vague. Set a specific plan and action before you walk out of that room. So it's okay if they don't say you're going to have this dollar amount by this day, but have a follow-up and say, and we'll revisit this in 1 month with this goal. Not just we'll revisit it, but we'll revisit it with this goal in mind. And this is what we're going to do to work towards it. So that's kind of my final word on that subject. And yes, you're very welcome. We just had to thank you for answering the question. You're welcome. So Michaela, you're here to talk to us today about the psychology behind pay and how pay affects people mentally and emotionally. So tell us a little, let's start with you just telling us a little bit about your thoughts on the subject.
Okay, so I was really excited when you said that this is what we were going to be talking about today, because this is something I've had training in since I was 14, I think, because I got really big into animal training, as you well know, Catherine. And that's what I first wanted to do, was animal training. And the reason this applies right now is because I was trained in what's known as behaviorism. Now I have, for counseling, I choose a different route. However, behaviorism, the idea is reinforcement. And specifically, I want to focus on the ideas of a psychologist known as B.F. Skinner. And he developed basically what's known as, it's what's used for animal training, and it's operant conditioning. And so it's this idea of schedules for reinforcement. And I'm hoping sort of as I'm talking, what you'll conceptualize is workplace and pay in the workplace. So for instance, when I say reinforcement, what I'm talking about is anything that so we put action towards things that are going to reward us. That's the general idea of reinforcement. And when you're looking at animals, like Maslow here, for instance, that would be like me teaching him to sit. Every time he sits, I give him something. That's a reinforcement. And what happens for Maslow is dopamine is released. And the same thing happens for us. And I want to make a quick disclaimer here before I continue, and that is that this is a very basic form of our biology and our functioning as humans. We have morals, values, and beliefs that come into play when it comes even to things like pay. So I wanted to just let y'all know that this is very basic, basic human functionality.
So real quick, Michaela, on that, as basic as it is, I don't want to undermine this either, because this is very much what happens and the experience that people will have as they're being paid. So, okay, so go ahead and continue, and then I have some more questions for you as well.
Oh, please. Yeah, no, I'm glad you said that, because like I said, since I've moved sort of past behaviorism, I always just like to disclaim, like, okay, I'm not saying this is it. There's so much more. But anyway, yeah, so like Maslow, for instance, that dopamine is released. That's the same thing that happens for us. So when we're reinforced for the effort that we put into things, that dopamine comes in and says, oh yeah, keep doing that. That's good for us. Keep it up, keep it up, keep it up. And because what it does then is it motivates us towards those actions that are good for us, like pay. So, and specifically it's, there's two M's. It's motivation, movement, and pleasure. That's what dopamine is used for. And I love that, because especially the movement, that's talking about action towards the motivation, towards the reward. And that's what I see just in a nutshell as far as pay goes.
So what would you hypothesize, or maybe you did some research on this, what would you hypothesize happens if, let's say, somebody isn't paid on time or was told they would get a bonus and then they don't?
Okay, so, two different things maybe sort of one of the same in some ways. So I'll address them each separately, and we'll see together how similar it is. So the first one you said was not paid on time.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so what's going to happen then? Let's just go from the psychological standpoint here with this whole reward system. Is, whoa, I was expecting a reward for all my efforts. All of a sudden, it's not here. That's going to decrease that motivation, that movement towards goals for the future. Emotionally, what you'll start seeing with that is resentment. You'll start seeing anger and even fear. You'll see fear and anxiety come up because that's a livelihood. And that's where like the values start coming in.
Okay. All right. And what about the second part? The expecting a bonus or something like that and not receiving it at all.
Yeah, that's now that I've sort of walked us through the first part, I'm sort of seeing that's very similar. The difference that I would see is in anticipation of greater reward and not getting it. I would still say that would be more of an emotional reaction. As far as the psychology, that resentment of, well, I was supposed to get this greater reward. No, I see a little, actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I see a little bit different psychological reaction as well, because what would happen is your body is set up for this bigger reward that's coming, and then the letdown's going to be bigger because your dopamine is going, and you're getting flooded with more dopamine, and when that doesn't happen, it doesn't have anywhere to go, and so you're just like, you plummet, and that can actually lead to depression really quickly. So I'm glad I walked myself through that, because that is a big difference.
Yes, it is. I think, and Susan Straub, who was our co-host last time, was apparently watching. Hi, Susan. And she commented, it will destroy trust. And that is 100% true. I have watched employers lose employee bases over that, and lose entire teams over pulling things like that. And it's incredibly unethical, but it also really destroys the trust. What's your take on some of this, Justin? You've been on that side of the desk.
Yeah, there's two things here. One, I was actually part of a group, and this was years ago, where we were expecting a bonus. What we got was equivalent to the jelly bean of the club month type thing. Our bonuses went off to some charity, and they're like, "Look, you're doing good." And you're like, "Well, wait a minute. Let me choose that charity. If I wanted to put that bonus out to a charity, great, but you just took my money." What I saw, right?
Yeah.
And then I've been in this situation where I haven't been paid for months at a time working at a company, where they're like, well, we just can't do it. Our accounting's slow, or this, and the excuses were piling up. And I think that distrust and resentment comes in fast and furious on that. And immediately you lose. I've never done that as a boss, because, it's paramount to me that people get paid. That's what it's what we're here for, right? I mean, it's called a job. We pay them for their services or whatever they're doing for us. And if we could pay early, we pay early. That's my philosophy as a manager or leader of a company. In this, the psychology is so detrimental to not only the individual that's going to be in your organization, which then becomes poison, because you've done something that was extremely unethical, but then that poison's going to spread. It's like, what's the expression? Poison in the well.
Yeah.
Right. Once you do that, you're done. Right. Well, you do it with one person, then your entire team is actually done. You might as well just try to figure out how to get back in good graces from that point on with everybody, not just the one individual.
100%. And this brings me into a subject about which I am very, very passionate, which is national payday law. So a lot of people, for those of you that don't know what payday law is what defines when you get paid, or the guidelines in which your company can determine when you get paid, how you get paid, making sure that you get paid on time, that there are consequences if you're not, that there are all different kinds of things kind of that fall into that bonus, all different kinds of things. So basically that's the law that determines the fairness of how you get paid and the structure to which you get paid in some cases. What I did not know when I lived in Texas has superb payday law. And what I did not know living there is that wasn't national. Not everybody had the same protections and rights that I did living in Texas, and that everybody else living in Texas did. When I moved to Florida, the very first company that I worked for, and I actually ended up reporting them for this, they wouldn't pay people for months, because there is no payday law in Florida. There's none. And so people would work 40, 50 hours a week and not receive a paycheck, sometimes for a month and a half. And they would use that payroll. Oh, accounting is slow. Accounting messed up. this happened, that happened. Oh, we didn't get your hours sheet. There were all these excuses. And the devastation. I watched single mothers become homeless. I watched people break down crying because they couldn't afford the medication for their children. And the devastation that this caused was heart-wrenching. And there are other states with good payday law. New York, for instance. California's is a little funky if you're a contractor, but outside of that, it's a little better.
Nowadays, who knows?
Nowadays, who knows with California? But a lot of these states either don't have payday law or it's really vague. And so there's just no penalty for not paying people money that you owe them. So first of all, everybody, when you go to talk to your congressman or you're going to vote, find people that care about payday law and push for those people. But Michaela, when you see things like that, when it comes to the psychology behind what it does to a workforce as a whole, as a group of people, not the individual, but a group of people, what would you see happening in that type of circumstance? Even to the ones that were paid on time but are watching their coworkers go through this.
Oh, man. For this one, I actually want to start on an individual level because I think it contributes to the whole. And what I heard when you're talking about 40 to 50-hour work weeks and all of a sudden you're not getting paid for it, what I saw inherent in that comment and that story were people who felt trapped.
Yes.
Because if they're not leaving a company that's doing that, that person is trapped there for whatever reason. There's not other opportunities.
Yeah.
And that applies to the whole because that's not going to be the only person there. That applies to multiple people. I can't imagine that would just be one person there because other people staying with that company means they're in the same boat. So I see a lot of people who are trapped together. And what I see happening with that is mobilization. I see people who are going to pull together and try to figure something out and probably face the company because
and they did.
That's what I was right. No, that's what I see happening because what other option would you have when you back people into a corner like that? What do you expect to happen?
Yeah, and that's
right there.
Yeah. It was a very interesting thing to witness, and I think that. First of all, shame on any company that pulls that kind of stunt. Shame on you, man. If you don't get somebody's pay right, you fix it the same day, no matter what. And my first piece of advice, if this ever happens to you folks, is go into HR's office or payroll's office, whoever it is that handles this. Sit down, look them in the face and say, I am not leaving until I get my paycheck. I will not be moving from this spot until I have a check in my hand or it's in my bank account.
Yep. Absolutely.
That's how you handle that. Do not go back to work and keep doing your job.
And I'd extend that to management. Be on top of this.
Yes.
If you're a manager and this is going on and you don't even know what's going on, because half the time I'll be honest, I wasn't always on top of payroll.
Right.
It's one of those things that you have people doing that job for you and your expectation is that job's being done. And if it's not being done, be on top of it. And if you do come across something like that, fix it as fast as possible. And do it with independent contractors as well. We have a policy where we do this with anybody. No matter what you do, what position you come in, you do a job, you get paid. And we instituted, you get paid weekly. We don't do this monthly or bi-weekly or bi-monthly or I don't know. The categories are there's so many of them. But weekly pay, just get it done. It's really simple. It's not hard. Yeah. We have software that does all this for us.
Yes, and that's it. It is simple.
Yeah.
Yes, and so I want to thank you, Michaela, for coming on. We're actually going to draw this subject into our next guest, Alif. So thank you so much, Michaela, for coming on. We really appreciate you. And bye, Maslow, too. But yes, and if you guys want to connect with Michaela, we have posted her LinkedIn in the comments. We've also posted a link to where you can learn what the payday law is in your state. So I highly recommend getting on there and learning about it. And if you have any concerns, if you have questions about what something means, please reach out to me. I'm glad to talk to you about this. Again, this is something about which I'm very, very passionate and will be in a couple of years helping to push, or over the next couple of years, helping to push for national payday law.